first great on paper game of the season. Going to be played tonight inside Cameron Indoor Stadium in Durham, North Carolina. It's number 2 Duke hosted number 12 Arizona. Tip schedule for 7 o'clock Eastern. That's on ESPN. We're going to pick it later in the season debut of the Final Four and One. Just start by talking through how this big brand versus big brand home and home series came together. Deadleg, you wrote about it, CBSSports.com. You talked to Tommy Lloyd. You talked to John Shire. What did they tell you about their decision to give the first week of this season its only ranked versus ranked matchup?
Yeah, the only ranked versus ranked matchup the first 8 days of the season, in fact, and can't wait for this game tonight. This is going to be big time stuff. Only the second time Arizona has ever traveled to play at Cameron Indoor. The previous time was just a 2-point outcome in favor of Duke. Tommy Lloyd is the person responsible for making this happen. Shortly after Shire took over the reins of the Duke program, Lloyd called Shire in the spring of 22 and he called him explicitly to talk. They're not, they don't know each other exceedingly well. They've seen each other on the recruiting trail here and there, but it's not like they're absolute buddies. And he saw Lloyd, who's always willing and wanting to schedule very aggressively. In fact, Arizona this season, when it's all said and done, could wind up with the toughest non-conference schedule in the country. It's at Duke. It's got a game against Michigan State, and we'll see what Michigan State is, but that's out in Palm Springs. It's got a game against Wisconsin. It's playing Purdue and Indianapolis. It's playing Alabama on a neutral floor as well. It's got Florida Atlantic and Las Vegas. So the point is Tommy Lloyd, and this is detailed in the column, but has ambitiously scheduled in the non-conference in a way that reflects, how he came up under Mark Few at Gonzaga. So he calls up Shire, and sometimes these things behind the scenes between coaches, I think, to kind of peek behind the curtain for our audience, there are plenty of instances you and I have heard over the years where, two head coaches at, two top 15, 20, 25 type programs, sometimes they successfully make a series work, and sometimes that takes years. Sometimes they get close to making something work and it just never materializes for one reason or another. Sometimes, frankly, those reasons are understandable, and sometimes, in my opinion, they are not. But in this case, it just didn't take long. Shire wanted him to do it. It was notable because Mike Krzyzewski did not willingly schedule a non-conference road game that wasn't mandated by a television arrangement. So this is not Big Ten ACC challenge stuff. The last time, as far as I can tell, and to be honest, I didn't 100% fact check this. So for all I know, maybe this might have also been TV mandated, but I'm giving Kay the benefit of the doubt. 2008 against Michigan was the last time Duke went on the road, and it wasn't in one of these specifically TV arranged roadies in the non-con for Duke. Duke did just fine for itself. Krzyzewski didn't necessarily have to do this, but it is better for college basketball in the first 4 to 6 weeks of its season if you have the Duke program either in its hallowed confines of Cameron Indoor or going into hostile territory against a big program in the non-con, having them in that kind of environment, right? And we will have that later this month when Duke travels to play Arkansas in the new ACC SEC challenge, and that's going to be an awesome thing. But Shire told me this is going to be the plan moving forward. I'm going to schedule a home and home with a big program annually, and so I would venture to guess that in years when Duke is scheduled to be on the road in the ACC SEC challenge, then Duke will have the home game against the big time team, just like this year. And then when that's flipped next year, Duke's going to go in the first week of the season play at Arizona. And they could be the number 1 ranked team with Cooper Flagg. That could be the best matchup of the entire non-con a year from now. Duke will get the home game against whatever SEC team comes in. So Lloyd wanted to make it happen. It didn't take long. And as the column points out, it's really refreshing that 2 coaches with 3 combined years of head coaching experience. Shire's 36. Lloyd's been around a bit. He's 48, but in terms of head coaching, he's still relatively new to the game. They are scheduling as though they have the best job security in the country, and frankly, they have very good job security. But it would be understandable, GP, if they weren't as ambitious as the way they've been. I hope that's a bit contagious, because to have Duke and Arizona, 2 clear top 10 programs in the country. From a brand perspective, Duke is probably number 1. Arizona easily is in the top 10, maybe even better than that. Agreeing to play each other, and then just this isn't going to change. At least that's what the guys told me. So I'm going to hold them to account. Like, we're going to continue to see Arizona and Duke, programs that matter on a national level, continue to be in these games in on-campus environments. And if more coaches had and I'm not saying that the sport is void of it. I'm not saying that. But it used to be more than it is now. And if more coaches took this approach, then we have some great games on Friday, GP. We would just have more than one ranked on ranked matchup in the first 8 days of the season.
Yeah, it would be understandable, as you put it, if neither one of these relatively young head coaches wanted to challenge themselves in the non-league in such obvious ways, if only because most coaches don't want to challenge themselves in such obvious ways in the non-league portion of their schedule, and they can get away with it. They a lot of them won't. I won't say most, or the overwhelming majority, but like a lot of them wouldn't do what Tommy and John have done here. Just realize you put their names together, you get Tommy John.
That's correct. I realized that when I was, I don't know, writing the column. It's not framed in there. I was like, when you put these guys together, they're
a surgery.
They're Tommy John. That's right.
You put these guys together, they become a surgery.
That's right.
Okay. So maybe that'll
By the way,
the
guy who got the surgery got the guy that named after him as opposed to the doctor that performed it. I've always had an issue with that. Shouldn't the guy that actually performed the procedure get the naming rights instead of the athlete?
I feel like I've never thought about it, but I feel like if I were the surgeon, and I did this surgery, and they named it after the guy I did the surgery on, I'd feel like, I got cheated a little bit.
Yeah, I got an issue with it.
So. I do. You know what?
I've been holding that in for the past 10 years on the show. So
I hadn't thought about it, but now I suddenly have an issue with it too. I take up your calls.
Exactly. Thank you.
I support
your movement. Yes.
I support your movement. I talked to John about this even before he officially took over the Duke program from Kay, and he had indicated that he wanted to do this. And just because Duke hadn't done this in recent years wasn't going to prevent him from doing it. And one of the things I think he understands, and I hope he understands this because it's undeniably true. I think he does understand this. Taking Duke somewhere is like a big deal. Like when Duke is at a place, that's a big deal. We can debate, and I know Kentucky fans and Kansas fans and Carolina fans, we can debate what's the greatest men's basketball program of all time or what's the greatest men's basketball program right now. I don't think there's much of a debate about what is the biggest brand in the sport. And that is, I believe that to be Duke. Somebody could maybe pull some numbers to try to support it or disprove it, but I think Duke being somewhere is a bigger deal than anybody else being somewhere on a national level. So I can just remember when I was a beat writer covering Memphis. Memphis played Duke in the NIT season tip-off title game, like day after Thanksgiving in the Garden, and that was a big deal. Not that Memphis was playing on national TV the day after Thanksgiving in the Garden. Yeah, that's it. Duke. That Memphis was playing Duke for a trophy was a big deal. And I just think Duke carries that kind of power in the sport. And if you have the power as the head coach of that program to take them to Arizona, then take that program to, UConn someday, to Gonzaga someday, to UCLA someday, however you want to do it. It does seem that, from reading your column, both these guys want to, it's not just, hey, let's find another good team. It's like, let's find another big brand. And let's do big brands on big brands. Yeah, it helps if the teams are both Final Four contenders, but mostly we want big brands. We want to go to where their home is, and we want to bring them to ours. I love it. It's good for the sport. I'd argue it's good for Duke and also good for Arizona independently because, as you point out in the column, I guess there's some downside to this in the sense that somebody's going to come out of here with a loss that they otherwise wouldn't have, but the committee is not going to punish you for losing at Duke. And if you're Duke and you lose the game, the committee is not going to punish you for losing to what would undeniably be a really good Arizona team if you win at Duke. So nobody loves like seed line bumps more than dead leg. You know that. But I think even he would tell you that the loser of this game on Selection Sunday, that somebody lost this game will matter. Not at all. I would suggest not at all.
Yeah, I think that's highly possible and likely. And that's the the risk is minimal. The upside is tremendous. I mean, if Arizona can go in and win this game and get a quad 1 win, there's a decent probability that by the time we get to Selection Sunday, if Arizona's to do it, and Arizona would get the road win, so it would have more value than Duke getting the home win. It could be one of the 5 most valuable victories of the entire season. And I'm not going to overstate this. This isn't a fearlessness. It's more of a, and Tommy, they both said that they want their teams involved in games against opponents that matter on a national level, that people want to watch these games. They want to test their guys. And I also think, and Shire didn't say this directly, but I brought it up in conversation, because the ACC right now is, and listen, the ACC is yet to lose a game as of the taping of this podcast. So maybe it's going to be undefeated by the end of the first week of the season. That would be a great thing. But because the ACC with 15 teams is putting at the feet of many of its teams more quad 3 results as a result of this, you can have a little bit of a tug on your resume in the wrong direction. And so to potentially offset that, because you can't control your league schedule, and the Pac-12 has some of this too. And frankly, I think it's, Tommy didn't bring this up either, but I have to think on some level, these are smart guys that certainly that lean into the metrics of the sport and understand how this works and how those things impact seeding and selection. Their conferences could be giving them just an extra 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 games that from a resume standpoint do nothing. And so if you can play this kind of game and the loss doesn't really hurt you and the win really boosts you, again, seed line bump situation here, then I think that's a factor that has to be acknowledged. I didn't put it in the column, but I also think that is part of it here. And I hope that is contagious. There's also another part of this that I mentioned in the story, and that's the MTE space, multi-team events. We are getting more of them by the year. And the reason we're getting more of them is the industry is able, through advertising and private ventures, to be able to provide a lot of money to these teams to get paid. Like the reason why Baylor played Auburn in South Dakota, in addition to the Pentagon being an amazing venue, is those teams got paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to play in that event by the organizers that surround it. Okay, that's why those kind of games happen. Now, that's not an MTE. It was a single game event, but in that space, the opportunity for these event organizers to say, hey, we want you to play in this thing with these 3 other teams. And if you do it, we're going to be able to pay you out $125,000, or we'll pay you $300,000. And so because of that, and because these programs are in the business of not just wanting to win games, but also make money, sometimes coaches see, all right, if we go to that, like, all right, maybe that one team is good and it's a good matchup, but the other one, like, we should definitely win that. And plus I get to bring home $250K to my athletic department. Because that is becoming more, it's a schedule creep. The availability, theoretically, for these high major teams to schedule these games like a true home away environments for your top 25 level programs, they are just, little opportunities here and there on the schedule are starting to disappear. That being said, ultimately, this is it's up to the coaches. The coaches have the say on what they're going to do when it comes to their schedule for the most part. Again, the Gavitt games, which are now going away, which are also taking place over the next week, that is a conference to conference. The coaches don't have control over those matchups, but there are still, depending on the team, depending on the school, you have 11 non-conference games. Coaches will have anywhere between 5 and 7 or 8 or 9 to decide, and they can pick which ones they want to do. It was a conscious decision for Arizona not to play in an MTE. I just talked to Chris Holtman at Ohio State. We'll get to the Buckeyes later on the show. He's another one. Now, Ohio State's not a top 20 program this year, but he said, I don't want to play in these neutral site games. I want home and homes. He told me he had constant requests the entire offseason. Hey, there's this MTE, there's this MTE, there's this MTE. He kept having to tell his staff and the people in his athletic department, I don't want this. I want to play home. So ultimately, this falls on the coaches, and I hope with the amount of attention that gets brought upon in Arizona at Duke this year and a Duke at Arizona next year, that the coaches that are in these, if you've got a projected top 25 level team, arrange these home and homes and just give it just a little more juice. This is a great thing. It's better than I take the game no matter what, no matter where, no matter how. But Arizona at Duke just is more exciting than Arizona versus Duke in South Dakota or Las Vegas or Orlando, Florida. So it's refreshing to see these two coaches intentionally seek this out, and they say that they're going to continue to do so.
It's good for the sport. It's also good for the players, and not just from get your battle tested perspective or whatever. Like, people get old. They stop playing basketball, but they still watch it on TV, and they got kids and they got grandkids. And then Cameron Indoor pops up, and so he goes, "Hey, Dad, you ever play there? Hey, I did play there. I did play. Yeah, back in November 2023, I guess. I mean, that's a real memory. Like, no offense to any neutral site location, but unless it's the Garden, most neutral court is like, yeah, it's
Maui. Let's give a shout out to Maui, but yeah.
Yes. It's cool for people to go play in places they've been watching on TV forever, and then to be able to watch TV forever and say, oh, yeah, we played there back in 2023. And, Duke creating home and homes, Arizona creating home and homes creates those memories for those players. It's just, you put a piece of paper down, start doing pros and cons. The pros far outweigh any cons for most coaches of big brands in the sport. And I, like you, appreciate Tommy and John. It's a surgery. It's a surgery. I appreciate both of them, being so willing, so early in their head coaching careers to go down this path. And like you, I hope more people follow their lead.